just for you know, the Elevate side. But if you guys feel free to, you know, if you want to stay afterwards and, you know, ask questions or whatever, we're happy to do that. Nice to meet you guys. I think I see Angel, Matt, and Matthew, Jessica. So welcome, guys, and everyone else that are online. Thanks for joining us. I think a few people are joining as we speak. So I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I will share sort of my my background here. Let me know if you can't see the screen. Can you see it, James?
No, I don't think it's shared.
Okay. Okay, cool. One sec. Okay, share screen. Should work. Okay, cool. Is that better?
Yeah, there we go. That worked.
Okay, excellent. All right, cool. So I guess we'll start with my background. I spent the last, I guess, 8+ years in the finance world. I started post my MBA, which I got from the University of Chicago. I was actually pretty early, and I started as an associate at Goldman in their investment banking group. And there, I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to lead what ended up being some of the largest transactions ever in FIG. And the background there is, this was sort of the last crisis, right? So think about 09, 10, 11. I graduated undergrad around then, and then I had a finance offer right out of undergrad, but unfortunately it got rescinded, my final year. And so just given how the markets were going, and it was actually in the real estate arena which was the biggest hit. And I was very disappointed, right? I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But, fast forward kind of a couple years later, I got my MBA, I came back and did finance. And so it's one lesson learned, at least from this crisis, is that there's a lot of we ourselves put a lot of pressure on ourselves to kind of get the career stuff right. I think it's important, but also know that you'll have a lot of transition points in your career to kind of make that and still be fine. So as far as my background, I spent 3 years in Goldman. I wanted to join a group in FIG, which was sort of a disruptor group when I joined it, because coming out of the financial crisis. So that's another thing I challenge you guys to do as you think about your own careers. Joining groups in areas that are interesting to you, B, challenging to you, but also areas that you see there's to be a ton of learning opportunities. And that's one lens that I took when I joined GS. Was extremely fortunate with my career trajectory at Goldman. I got to lead, like I mentioned, probably the three biggest deals ever in FIG. In kind of different ways you look at it. The $3 billion IPO of Synchrony, which is the largest since Facebook, and then the subsequent $20 billion split off. I also led a couple of different divestiture transactions like M&A and sell sides, which were also pretty big. And so for me, that was very formative in my early years to get that sort of experience in the business world, the M&A side. Then I made the transition to private equity as sort of investing. And so I joined and made principal in our Goldman's own private equity group, which is a $100 billion fund that we have within GS. And so that was right around kind of my mid-20s. And then very fortunate a couple years later to get a chance to join as a director, sort of in my late 20s, at another fund called Varde, which, is a pretty accelerated path if you think about it, sort of making that before the age of 30. And so we can talk a little bit about how do you, accelerate in your career at different points in time, and sort of things that might have worked for me or other people. And sort of in that private equity role, the task was to build our global private equity business. So now I was sort of, looking to do that in North America, in Asia, which is exactly what we've done. And 2019, I've spent most of the year in Asia, building out our Asia business, setting up shop there. And it's been it's a cool experience. So I'll kind of, we'll come back to that point. A couple of things I'll note here. I've always been interested in people development and sort of, people, the aspect of things. I think that's sorely lacking and missing in a lot of the business finance world. I think it's a very individualistic path in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, it could be a very lonely path along the way. So for me, those have just been something important to build out. So as a result, I took on a lot of leadership roles at Goldman. I was chief of staff within investment banking. I led our recruiting teams. I led our promotion committees, our summer offer committees for multiple years. So I've seen sort of candidates across, multiple years, both in banking and PE. So I can help, answer any questions to that front on the recruiting side. And then also I founded Elevate last year, which is where James and our partnership is within MIT. And Elevate effectively is what we're building, or what I'm building basically is the premier recruiting, networking, training platform for students and professionals. So as part of that, we partnered up with I guess now over 50 private equity, banking, venture capital firms and professionals to kind of on the side of actual professionals and the mentorship, and then on the sort of the investment group and students and professional side, we're partnered up with the premier groups, and I'll show you guys a slide on sort of this. So these are kind of the different professionals that we've had on the platform, and we continue to have them. We have 3 more sessions this month coming up for anyone that's interested. I can grab your guys' emails and send you that info. And then these are the groups that we're partnered up with. Within the last year, we've been kind of grown very, very fast. And I guess now we're probably partnered with at least the premier or 2 or 3 groups on each of these universities, both on the undergrad side and the grad side, right? So we've done workshops at all of them. We've done sort of other stuff in all of them. And I think where this sort of comes in for you guys is a couple different areas. I think, James, does it make sense for anyone that's interested to sort of gather their email? Maybe I'll send out a Google spreadsheet or something like that, and people can just put that in. Is that cool? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be awesome. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, cool. So let me do that in a minute, and then I think so. One thing I would say is definitely encourage you guys to stay in the loop and sort of learn from these different people. The other thing that's actually we've just launched this, and James and I were talking about this, but we're now building like the largest networking platform across all of our universities. So kind of think of it as, people who on the left is where we're starting out with going. So we're inviting, Sloan Business Club as well as MIT students into this. But, across all of our different groups, you can kind of see the premier groups of the other undergrad institutions. The whole goal is, can we sort of develop these relationships beyond the borders of our school? Because I understand from, James and Hunter and you guys, from before, obviously MIT has a business community, but may not be as large as some of these other schools that we work with. So like if folks are genuinely interested in investing in banking, venture capital, et cetera, why not open up our network to everyone, and then you guys give you the opportunity to network with other people from, like a Yale Investment Club or a U Chicago Maroon Capital Group or a, Berkeley Investment Club. And so you guys can kind of share best practices and network along the way. Number 2, I think building these relationships are going to have career-long implications as to kind of knowing people. That's the end of the day, like the most important thing about the world of business and the world in general. And then also I think you'll get sort of, connected to other people who are going to similar firms or similar types of careers, et cetera. So I think, it's a pretty cool initiative we started out. So if you're interested, here's the link. I'll send it in the Google chat as well. I mean, in the Zoom link as well, but it's ElevateLab/Finect. Another thing which I think would be interesting for you guys within Elevate is we host these professional sessions all the time. So I think the best way to learn is from professionals. So I've been very fortunate to bring in professionals from my network back into Elevate. So we've got 3 coming up. One is from a senior partner within private equity. That's this Friday. We're just doing like a Zoom, like a fireside chat. He was a founding member of Special Situations Private Capital at Goldman. He spent 9 years there. He's also been in other places before then. Next week, we're having on an associate from Centerbridge, which is a top 5 private equity firm. He was a Goldman Sachs investment banking analyst prior to that. And then the week after, we're having a senior associate from Goldman Sachs. He is also on the recruiting team. So depending on where people's interests are, you could feel free to join, any of these sessions and so on. So I'll send you guys info of that as well. And on the right is all the firms that we've had people on. And then lastly, the training component. Again, cursory level, I think one thing that we felt like was missing when I talk to professionals as well as candidates is like sort of a comprehensive training of what these careers are. So I mean, there's sort of isn't a great place where it talks about what is the ins and outs of a banking, a private equity, venture capital. So my approach here was to make something like this, or like this, but then be professionals from all these different firms, such that you got, people can learn from that. So if folks are interested, you can check that out. Again, this has made it like very accessible for students so that they can sort of get it. So those are sort of the things on Elevate. I'll pause there. I want to get a sense from folks maybe of where kind of what years we have, like what are we looking at, underclassmen, upperclassmen, sort of what type of careers people are interested in. Maybe we can start with that. Just people can just throw them out.
Yeah, I can go first. I'm a sophomore and I'm really interested in investment banking and perhaps also private equity.
Okay, cool.
I can go next. I'm a sophomore and I'm interested in consulting.
Okay, cool. Consulting, you should check out the conversation we had with McKinsey. Elevate was featured by McKinsey recently on their global platform. Yeah. So you should check. if you're interested. But go ahead. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can go. I'm a freshman.
Okay.
I'm not really sure what I want to do, but then I'm really interested in like investment banking and also hedge fund.
Okay, good. You're a freshman. You could use a little bit of time to figure it out. We can sort of get into that. Anyone else?
I'm also a freshman, not really sure where I want to go, but also interested in hedge funds.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Selena.
Yeah, I'm also a freshman. I'm interested in investment banking and entrepreneurship, but that's really subject to change.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Anyone else can feel free to go.
I'm Jessica. I'm a freshman, also interested in investment banking and maybe some trading as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, I guess we'll do a quick, since we have a lot of underclassmen on here. I'm just going to share with you guys this Excel really quickly, and then since we have a good amount of underclassmen on here, I'm going to spend a few minutes up front on like sort of the different career options, and in my mind, kind of what are the different pros and cons, and as well as sort of how you should think about them in the long term. Obviously, if folks have any questions beyond that, you can ask. So I'm going to share with you also this Excel, the spreadsheet. And for the freshmen, I definitely feel you guys having to start your first year remotely. I think it's pretty crazy. But hopefully by the time you graduate, it'll be fine. I'm just sending you guys the link right now. Let me know if you don't get it. It's in the Zoom chat right here. Oh, Haley got it. Okay, cool. So let's continue with the thing. When I've done a bunch of these, and I think the first place to start, which a lot of people ask about, is kind of what is the right field in finance or right career for everyone. And I'll just try to summarize from my experience of kind of going through this. And then if you guys want more information, on the right are the different conversations that we've had or featured on Elevate, completely free, that you guys can go back and listen to from professionals or senior people from there if you want more of a sense about each of these different careers, right? So I think just as a heads up. So on the investment banking side, right? I know a lot of people here said they're interested in that. The first thing I would say is it's the crux of the job is really an advisory function. So you're hired as an investment bank, right? So a Goldman, Morgan, et cetera, to provide strategic advice to sort of corporate clients, startups, management teams, private equity companies, et cetera, to help them figure out sort of what should be the strategy and financial strategies, frankly, for, oh, someone joined, guys, one sec. Maybe James, I should make you co-host so you can let people in.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
1 second. Oops. I think I could do that. All right, I just made you co-host. Okay, cool. So I think the first place, yes, investment banking. The crux of the job as a junior person is really a lot of, like financial analysis and sort of putting together presentations, et cetera, which is actually pretty true for all these careers. But when you step back from that, the crux of the job is providing strategic advice to your clients. So I think, you work on complex transactions deals. So you're hired by a company to be like, hey, I want to sell myself, or I want to go expand into this market. I want to go IPO, et cetera. And you're here doing the strategy as well as the execution of that transaction. You definitely build a very deep financial skill set, maybe less so of an operational skill set because you're not really deep diving as much as you would in a consulting or private equity function. And as you progress, the career becomes much more about client relationships, deal execution. Like I mentioned, at the junior level, it's more about sort of execution in the financial side. And then as you get more senior, it's more about relationships and actually execution from a macro level. The next field that a lot of people get interested in is we talk about, people mentioned this as well, private equity or private investing, as I call it. So either on the private equity side or the credit side. And in this case, the big difference here is you're not an advisor anymore, you're an owner, right? So you look at things from a sense of, all right, if I'm gonna own this company for the next 3 to 5 years, what do I need to do to kind of take it from where it is to the next stage, right? So it's effectively like finding your niche, finding your edge as an investor here in a private setting. In this, while in investment banking, you might be working on like a ton of different projects. you'll be doing a much smaller amount of projects or companies like deep dive, but you'll go a lot deeper because now you're thinking about it as an owner. And so it's just a different type of mentality. A lot of people like the notion of private equity without really understanding what it's all about. So I just kind of make it clear that it is definitely a job than any sort of other types of job. The key in private equity is finding the right fit firm or fund that's for you. So some people like going to large funds. Some people think the smaller fund is a better environment. Again, it's every person's different in this, but that's just something to think about. And then there's definitely a focus on both the financial and the operational part of the job here. So just something to think about. Whereas the banking side is much more transaction financial focused, here you're getting more of that. Venture capital, a lot of our Sloan students end up going to venture capital, or MIT students go and end up venture capital. And here you're obviously doing that investing, but at a much earlier stage. So the big difference between VC and PE is it's much earlier stage, and it's also non-control ownership of a company. And then it also actually requires, but also is helpful and aided by an understanding of technology and also interest in entrepreneurship and sort of ideas and trends in the space. And we can get back to VC if folks are interested on that. Public investing, James is a great resource for something like this, but here the crux of the job is finding kind of good companies and good ideas when everything is public, right? So you kind of, what is the edge that you bring to the table there? And you really deep dive into industries and stocks more than anything here, or other types of securities like that. And then finally, consulting came up. Consulting or any sort of strategy role is much more like in the title of it. It's more strategic in nature. So you may not be working on a transaction or on like a finance project, but you're kind of focused on improving either the operations or the strategic parameters of a company, right? So I think here you're more focused on sort of what a company should be doing at sort of at a strategic level rather than a much more tactical operational level. So sorry, a financial level. But all right, so let me pause there. Are there any questions in this? I'll wanted to spend a minute on sort of an overview of banks as well, but I'll pause there to see if there are any questions.
So I guess, Kaushik, just so on the private equity side, for like a typical analyst, let's say a couple years out of banking, what is the general split between sort of the modeling work, the financial side, and then portco work? And how dependent is that firm to firm? So
it's a really good question. So by the way, for the folks that asked for the networking link, I just sent that along as well, the Finec thing. You can feel free to sign up. We'll sort of go in phases. So we'll probably do, different classes first and stuff, but if it's there for if you guys want it to sign up. But I think, so the question was, it's a good question, James, around kind of the delineation of the work between more financial work, transaction work, and operational work. It all depends on the firm and the level, right? So when you asked about the levels, right at the associate side, most kind of, if you look at private equity, if you break that down by firms, it kind of maybe 3 or 4 buckets. One is sort of the mega funds of the world, right? So we're thinking Blackstone, KKR, Carlyle, Apollo, like all those guys, Ares, Centerbridge, so on and so forth. The speaker we'll have next week. I think that is sort of like investment banking 2.0. And what I mean by that is it's literally like, you're still doing 90% of your day as an associate, where they hire you guys in as associates, not as analysts. So you do 2 years in investment banking and then kind of do your associate role. And there, it's pretty much like all, if not all, financial modeling, all diligence, all transaction related work. You're at the junior level, especially a first or even a second year associate, you're probably doing very little at those large shops on a portfolio side. More the principals level and then the director level are much more involved in sitting on the boards. You might go to board meetings and do some work around that. But as your kind of role evolves, I think as you get more senior, you definitely do more of that. But then if you go into sort of the next tier, which is sort of upper middle market firms, right? Those are sort of anywhere from like 10 to 30, 40, 50 billion of AUM. And how we think about it that way, there you're probably doing some combination of deal execution and portfolio work, just because they're not as large, but also as like delineated as like every team has a principal and associate, et cetera. So you can kind of do more of the portfolio work. And then as you get to more middle market firms, which is sort of in the arena of $1 billion to kind of 10 billion AUM, there you're doing much more sourcing and much more portfolio work, just because it's sort of a jack of all trades sort of role there. So a lot of people, when they go out and recruit. And that's just private equity, that's private equity. And then there's another segment for growth equity and then one for venture capital. So if you look at growth equity, sort of places like TCV come to mind, General Atlantic, War Growth, those kind of folks who are sort of in the middle, they're not doing buyouts, but they're doing sort of late stage investing, right? So Series D, Series, E, C, something like that, pre-IPO fundraising. And there you're doing also more operational work and sort of sourcing work. So I would say it depends. In PE, at the largest places, a lot of transaction diligence and work and less so portfolio management. As the size goes smaller, I think there's a chance you do more of that. And also kind of your own interest, right? Some associates don't want to do that. They want to do more of the transaction stuff and not. And then as you go sort of downstream from private equity down to growth capital and then to venture, you probably get more of the business understanding and less of the financial analysis. So there's definitely multiple factors at work. And as you go more senior, you're doing much more, you're sitting on more boards, you're doing less modeling. So it just kind of, evolves over time as well. Is that helpful, James?
Yeah, no, that's super, super helpful. I guess just a quick follow-up. I don't want to monopolize the questions, but as far as the sourcing process goes in private equity, I know that in the public markets, sourcing is a big aspect of it. A lot of your differentiation can even be in sourcing. In private equity, is a lot of the sourcing just driven by bankers bringing you deals? Like how much of it is kind of proprietary sourcing in PE?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think proprietary sourcing happens sort of one of two places. So at the large shops, it's much more like, big bankers bringing you deals, right? So yes, for the most part, right? It would be, you have existing relationships with investment bankers, and then they sort of say, hey, this company's up for market, et cetera. And I would say at the large shop, that's about 50 to 60% of the deal flow. Everywhere else, I think the other 30, 40%, 50% comes about your own relationship building. And that happens actually probably at the principal level. So at the principal level, you are expected to kind of go out, meet a lot of management teams. On the inbound, we get a ton of deals. But as you guys know, when someone's raising capital, you don't want that to be the first time you're hearing about the company, right? So you hopefully have heard about the company in other places before then, because otherwise you kind of, I'm always skeptical of the quality of the company. The first time you're hearing about it is doing a fundraise, right? So there's some of it like you want to kind of maybe have heard about the company beforehand. The other thing is you are also creating theses and investing, I guess investing thesis is a good way to think about it, of different sectors, right? So let's say you're in technology investing and you're like, hey, I think, SaaS companies, given COVID and all this stuff, are going to continue to outperform in the next 5 years. Let's go find, enterprise software, SaaS, or let's go find these type of companies. So you are doing your own desktop research or meeting with companies beforehand and sourcing that. Not all of them are going to need capital today. Not all of them are going to need capital. Not all of them are, frankly, going to maybe always be in the market. But you sort of start doing a little bit of work and understanding, all right, what does this company do? How does it do better than others, et cetera? You want to have sort of a theme and thesis before they even come to market or think about coming to market. So that's where sort of the proprietary nature of this stuff comes in. And then lastly, about relationship building, right? Like I mentioned, you guys, if not already, like consider networking and relationship building your number one objective in the world of business, or just actually in the world in general, because it's almost never what you know, it's almost who you know and like how well you know them. Because at the end of the day, like, we'll get applications, like 50 applications or, 300 applications from a particular, just even on the job side, from a particular university. How would we go from 300 to 30 first round interviews, when all of them look kind of similar on paper, right? So again, this is the importance of sort of networking on the recruiting side, but even more broadly, like, the bankers I hire, the consultants I hire, the operational people I hire are all people I know and I work with and have good relationships with. So similarly on the management team side, I want to try to meet management teams. I think some investors try to meet like 10 management teams a week. Again, it depends if you're on the venture side or growth side, you're meeting a lot more. On the private equity side, a lot less. But it's still, to be honest, James, like a lot of that is proprietary. So I'd probably say like 60-40 or 50-50 between deals coming in and then your own proprietary stuff. Because you got to understand, right? If deals are coming in from bankers, like inevitably those deals are going out to like 10 or 15, 20, 30 other firms. So your ability to pay kind of shrinks if everyone else is going to pay up. You don't really want to be in a super competitive process and have to pay. It's like kind of buying a house, right? Like if somebody, if you kind of come in before a process hit and then put a bid in, that's a better situation than when the thing hits Zillow and then 100 people are looking at it and now you're in a bidding war with like 5 people. You're just gonna end up overpaying for it. So you got to kind of figure out your edge in these things, which is why so much of private equity and M&A is like tactical. That's a big lesson learned for me. Like it's all about negotiation strategy and you kind of, you know, reading other people as opposed to, you know, just overthinking it for yourself. That's probably one of my biggest lessons learned within M&A. And we can get into some of that. But, you know, I think that, so to answer your question, a lot inbound, but the best investors are doing a lot of proprietary work and getting deals before anybody else gets it. Is that helpful, James?
Yeah, no, that's incredibly helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I'll open it up to other people.
Okay, yeah, no worries. If and folks that joined late, I think on the Elevate side, I just shared with the Google Docs of all the people that have signed up. Great. If you guys want info on sort of upcoming, like all the professionals events, you should just put it on the Google Doc that I just shared. Okay, let's keep going. Any other questions before we sort of jump back into the materials? Okay, so let's keep going. So I'll give you guys a quick overview of kind of from my experience, what I think you guys should know if it is investment banking. And even before we jump into like M&A, I want to give you guys a good sense of what is an investment bank and what does it do at a high level. I know 90% of you guys said you were interested in this. So we'll spend a couple minutes on this. I would kind of characterize this into 4 main areas, and this is evolving as we speak. But you know, one is corporate finance, which is the traditional investment banking role, which we'll get back to that. That's the advisory portion. That's the M&A portion. That's sort of the capital markets functions and all that stuff. There's also a big sales and trading component, which I didn't hear a lot of people here say they were interested in. But to the extent that you are, I did a sales and trading internship in undergrad back when, and I realized it wasn't for me. So if anyone wants to, you know, dig in, you can LinkedIn message me later. And by the way, anyone who added me on LinkedIn that I just got will take care of that after the sessions. I'm not ignoring you guys, but we'll respond to that afterwards. But I think, you know, if you guys want to think about sales and trading, this is much more like you're actually in the markets, right? You are trading and selling individual securities, stocks, bonds, etc. This whole arena is being disrupted by kind of technology as we speak. But still, like our top banks are the biggest market makers and sort of leaders in this space. Research, there's a huge component within investment bank that does research. Again, I didn't hear a lot of research people here, but that's effectively like equity research, doing fundamental analysis on companies, which you would do as part of a job at a hedge fund or other jobs as well. It's in order to make recommendations to the broader market on if you're going to be making these decisions. And finally, there's asset management, wealth management, which is effectively producing products, right? Like the indices products or whatever products in an investment bank. So if you're going to get that sense from an investment bank, there's a lot of interdependencies here. If we were just to kind of zoom into the function of investment banking, corporate finance, there's kind of 4 big areas, and this is where it sort of gets more interesting for people here. One is M&A. So here you're advising clients on buying and selling, acquiring, selling themselves, companies and divisions, and sort of that's the primary function here. So for instance, when we were hired at GS to, hey, can you guys, you know, help us either, you know, sell parts of GE, which is what I advised on early part of this decade. That was a huge deal for them. And so they hired us to say, all right, you guys execute it for us. So that becomes like a top priority issue for the entire management team. So all of our meetings are sort of with CFO and CEO level people. And it's a pretty cool like place to be as someone in their early 20s, right? So that's one of the cool things about M&A. Capital markets here is more around raising capital, right? Equity or debt. Again, the IPOs that I've done over my career, kind of, we can talk about that if people have questions, but effectively like if Uber wants to go IPO, Snowflake wants to go IPO, some of these companies wants to go IPO, they'd hire a bank to kind of facilitate that transaction. Leverage finance is where you advise on large LBO or any transactions that require additional leverage. So sort of any private equity transactions. And then finally restructuring, which is very, very popular these days, especially kind of during crisis or post-crisis. You're advising companies on kind of how to recover and survive from, you know, catalyst events that could either be market events or downturns or business changes, leverage, bankruptcy, you know, credit, all those sorts of things. And so that's just a different type of M&A type of context. So these are all the functions or product groups. And then banks are also split up by industry groups. So based on industries of your interest, it could be telecom, it could be tech, it could be healthcare, it could be financial services. You could also work in an industry group and cross-function all these different things. This is how Goldman set up, where they have industry groups, and then they have sort of, you know, different product groups that are all encompassing within the industry groups. So before we jump into recruiting, do folks have any questions on stuff we just went over? Or any questions even on recruiting? Okay, if nothing, then what is top of mind for people? Let me just ask that. I guess people want to, I think, learn, which is great, but what is sort of top of mind, especially for maybe the sophomores and juniors? I mean, the freshmen too, but I'm curious on your career side.
I mean, I think.
I can. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
James.
Kari, you go.
Okay. Sorry for being a little late. I was on a work meeting, but so I'm going to quantitative finance, and I was wondering if you had any perspective on kind of adjusting your career path or how to decide between future plans like 2 or 3 years out of college. Like once you've already started your career. I'm a junior.
Junior? Okay. So I will give you my view, and then I will ask you to, if you have time, to look at this conversation we had on Elevate with this quant from Citadel. He's literally, and I know a lot of people within Citadel, and he's one of the like top guys they have. So we had him on Elevate. He was also an Olympic athlete. He was at Harvard. He was on the rowing team.
Is this the rower? Yeah.
Sorry?
I work at Citadel right now, so I've heard about this guy.
Okay, cool. You should know Andrew. So just you look at the conversation we had with him. He's like an all-star there, and I think he kind of really goes into what his thoughts are on like career and kind of finding that stuff. I think for me, right? I think for you, for juniors, you guys are so early. My thoughts on sort of anything with an internship is sort of figuring out like, is this something you could see yourself? Because working at Citadel, right? I mean, one of my roommate at Booth was as a senior guy now at Citadel, and then we also had another person from Citadel. So I know the quality caliber of that place, and it's very, very sharp, very talented people. And so my point is like, see if you obviously you're gonna be challenged by this, but be like kind of stepping into their shoes. Is that something you aspire to be? You know what I mean? In 3 to 5 years, since that was your question, I think you should really challenge yourself to say, look, is this the intellectually stimulating nature of the work that I really want to do? And B, is this the type of people that I want to be when I'm 3 to 5 years old? And again, there's no wrong answer, right? It's a very personal answer, right? So even before I jump into any technical stuff or whatever, I'm fully confident that all you guys can handle and the girls can handle the technical aspects of the job. So I'm not even concerned about that, but it's more about like, is this a role that you want to be in? And then I think so that's really, really the first part. The second part is like, what competitive advantage do you have as you look ahead, right? Are you genuinely interested in markets? Like, are you, interested in looking at data and trends in a different way? Because that's what, you're doing on the quant side. It's kind of how do you cut up this data in a different, interesting way? Or are you like generally have different views that you've tested out that are kind of proven well? So are you a good understand? Do you have a good understanding of companies? Do you have a good understanding of data technology? And do you have a good understanding of investing? So you sort of kind of evaluate for yourself how you are on that spectrum. And then I kind of say, all right, so what if these jobs or roles put me in a position to be successful in that position, right? That should be the end goal. Look, in your 20s, it's a lot about discovery, right? So it's about, all right, is this the careers that I want to be? Because then your late 20s is about then acceleration, right? So I think you want to sort of use this opportunities to find that, right? Does that make sense, Kyrie? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Okay,
definitely
cool.
does.
Okay, and how's your Citadel experience been?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone here has heard me like rant about this a lot already, but I really enjoyed it. The things that you mentioned are things that I've thought about. I really do enjoy the work that I'm doing, the people that I'm around, the team that I'm with. And I think it is like a really valuable learning experience.
Sure.
The reason I ask is the one thing I do think a position like quant research doesn't quite have is like the ability to work with clients and get a little bit more like hands-on industry knowledge. My team works a lot with data, so I feel like I understand like the background and like the investing process pretty well, but I'm not as involved with like how to actually build a good business or working with management teams and learning how to turn that either into a good company or into a good trade. So that was kind of my question in terms of, is that worth something trying to explore more after a few years in the career?
I think so. Like every career has a trade-off, right? So you kind of, every job has sort of a trade-off that you point out, right? I think some of the trade-off might be that there's just no time, or B, like whatever you think you want, that particular function you mentioned may not be high on the value stream from kind of what you need to do for the day-to-day stuff. But there's also your own personal interest, which is kind of your highlighting. Hey, I would like to be more involved in management teams, et cetera. So for yourself, my personal advice for D would be kind of figure out where that ranks in terms of the other 4 or 5 things you're looking for in the job, and understanding that that's a weakness of the job itself. Number 2, can you find ways to supplement that, right? So can you, even when in college, like, do you want to like maybe try out a consulting function or try out a super heavy advisory function and see if that makes up for, during the school year, that is, or, whatever you want to do, if that makes up the lack of, maybe intellectual stimulation that you may not have there that you do in trading, and kind of figure out for yourself. And then 3, maybe you try to identify, obviously it's hard to turn down Citadel, but if you really think there's other firms that do a combination where they meet with, management teams, or they meet with certain things to sort of create their investment theses. I had on the Elevate platform, he was one of the youngest, he was at Cantillon. I don't know if you heard of that fund. It's a long short fund in New York. I think James and I were talking about this guy, and he got to do a lot of like one-to-one interactions with people early on, like talking to suppliers, talking to people, et cetera. So he was one of 9 people at a $15 billion fund. So you kind of have to do everything on your own. It's not like the institution that is like Citadel. So my point is, like, if those first figure out, where that ranks. Number 2, then figure out like how, if there's other, you can get other experiences that'll give you that. And if that's satisfying enough in trading off these other things. And number 3, then maybe if that's really, really important to you, find places that allow you to do that. Or number 4, just go do it and get that experience, and then figure out for your next job kind of what you want to do, right? Because you get all those other experiences of being on a top fund like that, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That really helps.
Yeah,
if you don't mind, could I ask one more follow-up?
Sure, go for it.
So
there were a ton of other questions, so I'm happy to take questions for you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry if I'm hogging the time, but so under the situation that, like, if I do want to continue after like 2 or 3 years, I think it is like the best place for me. What do you think, like, in your career was the best ways you figured out how to kind of like get ahead and move into leadership positions rather than always kind of staying at that entry like level?
Yeah, this is the hardest thing, right? I think, so the couple things I'll say about finance careers, right? They're naturally sort of set up in, especially at the lower level, like move up or move out, right? What they call it, kind of like push people out and all those sorts of things. And so it's in a way like helpful because it sort of helps you figure out for yourself if you want to stay there, right? So I'd say there's a lot of that movement already happening at a lot of these top firms. That's number 1. Number 2, I think the biggest differentiator, and I've seen this across thousands of associates and analysts that I've had under on any of these recruiting functions, or within Elevate now, we reach, I say, close to like 3,000, 4,000 students across the country every year. And I think the biggest thing that I think makes a difference for people between staying at that level and then stepping up is ownership. And what I mean by that is really there's kind of people, I think, who start off and they are a little bit more timid in sort of stepping up and being like, hey, I will own this analysis, own the risk of being wrong. Like, it's okay, and I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I want to own the risk of being right, in the sense that I will learn over time. So that level of ownership in your work really, I think, differentiates people. I think that comes into fruition in a lot of different ways. One is like, whatever analysis, one is asking for it, right? So one is saying, hey, I'm stepping up. I want to own the financial model. I want to own this part of the debt presentation. I want to do this X, Y, and Z. Or whatever the little tasks that you're given, kind of doing them and completely, like, owning every part of it. So things like buyer lists, or just things like contact lists, like very, calendars, like very minutia that analysts need to do. Just really taking charge and be like, hey, this person didn't respond to this meeting, this partner, should I go chase them? Should I do this? So just really like taking ownership of whatever task is. And that's one element of what I mean by ownership. The other element of what I mean by ownership is really like delving deep into the analysis and really understanding, like, why are you being asked to do what you're going to do? And is there sort of better ways to do that? Or if not, why is it the way that they've done it? So a lot of people just kind of do it and say, oh, it's because I saw it in the president model and that's how you're supposed to do it, but then not ask the question of why, right? So I think that ownership manifests itself in a lot of different ways, both from a day-to-days to like ownership of full things. And that's been the best way, because think about it in a practical sense, and I'll give you guys, right? If my analysts at Goldman, for instance, like stepped up to the plate and really owned parts of the meeting or parts of the process, I'm going to be like, hey, analyst, you just go on the client call. I'm not going to be on there. You just run the call because you know what's going on and you're sort of in ownership. So we've done that to analysts kind of month 1, month 2, put them on the phone with clients, because it sort of frees up capacity for the rest of us, because it's a very, very lean team across the board. And those are the real ways that like ownership manifests itself in the day-to-day setting, right? So I think for me, it's been about sort of ownership, and then also just kind of diving in and just kind of getting your hands wet, and not sort of, I think, yes, being cognizant of risks, but not really letting that stop you from sort of taking that ownership and diving in, right? Is that helpful, Carrie?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, of course. Awesome. So let's keep going. I think there are a couple people who asked about the networking platform, so I'll send the link out again. And James, you can facilitate it after the fact as well. But so that's the Finec thing. I think we're in the process of setting up sort of those sessions on a bi-weekly basis, but probably starting either next week or the following week. So you should definitely sign up, shortly if you guys want to look into that. So let us maybe spend a minute. I will 1 minute or maybe a couple minutes on recruiting. I know a lot of people are going to be going through that process. So let me spend a minute, and I'm going to say, I said, what are bankers looking for? But the title of the slide could really even be, what are like finance professionals looking for? And as I thought about when we did the training or other things, wanted to share with you guys both my own experience, but also from other professionals. I personally, and we all sort of look for 5 things. One is analytical ability. So ability to solve complex problems in sort of in a short, in sort of the parameters that are given. And as I go through this, guys, as much of this isn't just like check the box items, but we're looking for examples, experiences that you guys can bring to the table that exhibit these things, right? So analytical ability, it could be, complex problems that you solved at a company that you worked at, an internship, at a school, club, or whatever it is. But I think really showing that you could do that, really, really important. Number 2, leadership skills. Can this candidate excel as an individual contributor while also being, sort of a team player? And what I mean by that, and the best way to show that is like via leadership experiences at things you've done at school or personal experience like companies and things like that. And the reason why it's important, this is probably the number one thing that differentiates for me candidates when I look at resumes or when I look at interviews, is can I just walk out of this saying, all right, they picked 2 or 3 things that they were really passionate about or really good at and really like excelled at it, right? So they were the student leader, or they were the board member, or they were the CEO, or they were the founder, or whatever, and they moved the needle on something, and they were actually cared about something. So this is hugely important because it's an indication to me that they will, it's one of the indications that they will bring that same level of sort of leadership and care to the work that we're asking them to do kind of on the other side. Drive and initiative, again, all of you guys have this just by virtue of being in these groups and being in this, but how do you exhibit that you kind of can make things happen, and also results oriented, again, by the nature of your experiences, and we can get into that if you folks have questions. Number 4 is really important, right? I think when you think about trading, when you think about finance, when you think about banking, or even consulting for that matter, or private equity or anything, we want to know that you sort of have an interest in finance and also companies. And so a lot of questions that we'll ask is, all right, are there any interesting companies you guys think about? What are some business models you like? Why business or why finance? Are there any deals that you're looking at, or what industries are interest to you? I think we want to get a sense from you, whether it's through your personal activities, your extracurriculars, et cetera, or via just some of the answers you'll give in the interviews, that this is a career you're actually like genuinely passionate about, right? Just like Google in their interview will ask you about, tell me what the 3 biggest tech problems are that we should be solving. You can expect some of those questions in your finance interviews. And then finally, communication. I think that's super important, especially because you're at any given time working on 4 or 5 different things, and it's really important for you all to manage all those things well and be able to communicate that both upward and downward. So I think that becomes really, really important. And a couple of things I'll say on the recruiting. Given a lot of you all are freshmen, but this is advice I've given every single school across all the Elevate network, is spend the requisite time up front just getting a deeper understanding of what are these different career options, right? So Kyrie mentioned sort of the trading side. James has, kind of mentioned the banking as well as the trading side. And some of you guys mentioned consulting, et cetera. This is a great opportunity, undergrad, especially the first couple years of undergrad, is to really open up your minds to all the different possibilities and understand the pros and cons for yourself. That's the other thing, right? These are all careers, are all great, and there's been really successful people in all of them. But at the end of the day, you'll be most successful in areas that you like, you're uniquely good at, and you actually like want to be good at, right? So I think that's one thing I'll highlight for you guys. And then once you have a better sense, so have a laser-like focus. Recruiting is very competitive. I obviously MIT is the top school in the world, but regardless of that, recruiting is really, really competitive. So what can you do to sort of build that edge over your early on your time that'll help you get to the best places and firms. Obviously, you can use the Elevate network to learn from other people who've been very successful in the process or are senior people at these firms. But a lot of this work you have to do on your own, right? So you have to sort of figure out why this is a career for you and then be prepared for it. Recruiting really favors those that are prepared early. I think you guys can ask your upperclassmen, right? It's the people that are prepared for these informational sessions, people that are prepared for some of these sessions or meetings, et cetera, that actually end up doing better than other people. And then no matter where you are, I'd say kind of put in the work and really like be ambitious in what you do. And then finally, allocate your time efficiently across the main aspects of recruiting. One is networking, relationship building. The other is skills building. And the third is resume and experience building. Some people kind of do one and forget about the other two. And if you network really well, but don't build the skills, you'll never, you won't do well in the interview. If you have all the interview skills, but don't network, you may never get the interview spot to begin with, right? So I think you just have to do all these things well enough to get in position. Great thing for you guys, you go to a great school, you've got great alumni, you got great upperclassmen who you can really learn from, and you've got you can use the resources on the Elevate network to obviously help you do that as well. So I'll, let me pause there. I know, whoops, let me pause there and see if folks have any questions on that stuff. Okay, so maybe there's a couple other topics I wanted to continue to delve on within the recruiting concept or the area. Look, I think I wanted to also, one of my students at another school, it was last night, James, I was at your chief competitor across the river? But I was speaking to Harvard, and we were kind of delving into this group of sort of like, I wanted to put together a slide for you guys, like, or for all our students, like just summarizing in my mind, right? We talked about networking, resume development, and skills building, like what I think you guys should be doing if you're early on in this career. I think the networking aspect, it really doesn't stop like ever in your life or your career. The people that are the most successful in their careers, I'll tell you this now, I'll tell you this 5 years from now, I'll tell you this 5 years ago, are the people that have the best positive relationships with other people, in the industry or the world that are much more successful. Because, aptitude and all that stuff is really important, but at the end of the day, like really the relationships that move the needle. So what does that mean for you guys? I would start out there and start developing these relationships and network at a granular level, right? So if there's firms or industries that you've identified as being interested in, reach out to a few alums and start saying, hey, I'm an MIT student. I'm really interested in X, Y, and Z industry because of this. I would love to get on the phone and talk to you for 10, 15 minutes about this, right? So I think just developing that level of networking and just that mental, kind of get those muscles working, really, really important. Because the truth of the matter is you won't be good at it right away, right? There's very few people that are really good networkers right away, but if you do it consistently and over time, you'll become better at it and you'll have sort of, better relationships that build up over time. So that's on the networking side. Number two, resume development side. I always get this. So it's sort of like a circular logic, you can't get a job without experience, but you can't get experience without getting a job. So my advice here is just cast a wide net and try to go into the best jobs, experiences, internships that you can. I think some of the upperclassmen on this call can attest to the fact that they didn't land at their final job, right? You kind of have to work your way up to that. And so each experience is going to teach you something. You're all relatively early on. Definitely try to go out there and get real experiences. There's no substitute for real world knowledge and experience, which is why on the Elevate side, I emphasize so much of like the professional perspectives, because that's so important. And then thirdly, I think skills building. Recruiting happens quite early. So you have to develop the requisite skills to convince people that you want to do this job and actually you're going to be good at this job, right? So we'll get to interviews and stuff later if we have time, but the crux of the thing here is like, people want to know that you can actually do the job. So you guys should have a better sense and a good understanding of what is the banking job? What is the PE job? What is the M&A job? What is the trading job? Such that you sound more informed, right? The biggest thing that I found when I get on the phone with people, especially in recruiting, is they lack a fundamental understanding of the job. They just, called me or they just wanted to network because they saw Goldman Sachs and they wanted to show up, right? So I think just developing that understanding of the job really makes a big difference. Because your goal in any of these networking sessions is that you talk to a professional, they get off the phone or they get off the Zoom, and then immediately, reach out to the recruiting team saying, hey, I met this candidate who's pretty good. I really enjoyed meeting them. They had good questions. They asked like the right type of questions. And I think we should move on the process, right? So that carries so much more weight than anything you could put on a paper, right? Anything else you could do in terms of your recruiting. Oftentimes, if we got calls like that, we would probably not even see the resume of the candidate, which kind of move them along the process, right? So I think just understand the power of sort of those type of connections and that they have. So I think that is it on the recruiting side. I think I had some more stuff on the resumes, and if folks didn't really have questions around that or interviews, we've gone over. So I'll pause there. We have 5 minutes left. I think it's 5 of. So again, open forum back to you guys on anyone who wants to ask any last minute questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a freshman and I have like no experience with this. And then this whole concept of networking is really new to me.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on building these connections without being like too artificial, like how to naturally build these connections?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think look, I will venture to say, when I started doing this networking stuff, I was really bad at it. I think I'll give you my mistakes, right? First, I was too afraid. That was one thing. I was too afraid to just kind of go out and start meeting people. That's one big mistake. Number two, I didn't prepare enough. I would get on these calls and I would say, hey, this is Kaushik. Like, I'm so amazing because I'm a student here. I've done this. It was very like me driven, like, oh, think about how amazing I was. And it wasn't like, I wasn't connecting enough to the person, right? And I'll get into some of those strategies there. And then number three, I didn't prepare in the sense that I didn't have good questions, right? So oftentimes I'd get on these calls and I'd say, hey, can you just tell me about your experience at, at Carlisle, and can you go through that? And then we would spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they would do that. And then I'd be like, okay, see you later, thank you. And then I have had no opportunity to like talk about myself or, even present myself as a candidate. And that's just a waste of time, right? At the end of the day, yes, I learned something, but in the arena of networking and recruiting, it's sort of a not as an impactful thing. So on the flip side, what you can do and avoid some of those mistakes, one advice I'd give you guys is just start doing it. I know it's hard, and we'll get to kind of how, but start somewhere, right? So if you think you're interested in, I don't know, pick a career, investment banking, like go into the Sloan Business Club's alumni network, or go into sort of upperclassmen, right, seniors now or whatever, and just drop them an email. Like, think of that as networking and say, hey, I'm really interested in learning about this. I want to know what you did this summer. I'd love to learn more because it's a career that interests me, right? So sort of use those as testing points to sort of working on that. So you mentioned sort of being a little apprehensive to know where to start. My suggestion is start with familiar faces. Start with, upperclassmen, 15 minutes, just say, hey, or you can even be frank with them, be like, I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to work on my networking skills. I'd love to learn what you did this summer, but also kind of, practice this with you. And I'm sure people will say yes. And then once you get a little bit of comfort there, then move on to maybe first year analyst, second year analyst at some of these banks and sort of start building that, right? So I just say sort of step up. You don't have to start with the partner at Morgan Stanley, right, tomorrow and email them. And I mean, they might respond to you, but it may not be quite ready for you to do that yet. So just kind of build up along the way. Really, really take advantage of your alumni networks. I've worked with a ton of MIT students before. I've seen that I'm familiar with your alumni network. We've had them on the platform. I worked with a lot of them in a professional capacity. It's a strong network, and you have the other great good fortune of being connected to Sloan, which is also a great business school. So leverage those networks. It's as quick as going on LinkedIn and seeing who's an MIT alum at X, Y, and Z bank that you're interested in at a Citadel, and then reach out to them. Obviously work up to that. So that's on the sourcing side, right? Then on the actual preparation side, for each of these conversations, I would treat them like interviews. You know what I mean? Go deep. First, develop your own sales pitch and kind of practice that in front of the mirror. And then on the other side, treat them like, hey, I'm going to dig up information from LinkedIn or some of these other sources and really like come up with like 10, 15 questions that are good questions to ask them. It could be about their career. It could be about the industry they work in, about their trajectory, whatever it is. The biggest thing I want to see from people or candidates in these calls is that they're prepared and they kind of generally know what they're doing and kind of you have a level of comfort. So preparation is another thing. And third, having a thick skin. Like, you're going to have a ton of these reach outs or whatever, and people aren't going to respond. or you may just get ignored. It's okay. There's X million people who work in this industry, right? So if you don't, 5 of them don't respond, there's another, million people, right? So I think just be relentless sort of in that. Again, don't go overboard, but I think just start developing those skills. And hopefully over time, I guarantee you, if you start kind of doing that and maybe set, I don't know how you work, but if you like targets, maybe you set like, hey, every month I'm going to meet 5 interesting people and set that as a target and sort of do that. So I understand it could be very intimidating at the beginning, but help yourself by being prepared, practicing, etc. And then sort of work up your way. And then also go and being like, all right, I'm going to have some of these sessions that are bad. That's sort of part of doing the business or part of doing this, and you will get better over time. Is that helpful, Daniel?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So I guess if I don't know if there's any last minute burning questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, definitely check out, I don't know, James, anything else from your end? I'd say definitely check out the Elevate stuff. I think you'll find a ton of useful information. Like, I think what I've realized as I've built this out is there's just so few places where you can get high quality information, learning directly from successful professionals. And frankly, a lot of these jobs aren't like out there in the career centers of the world just because, they require sort of, a lot of people in the career center even though they do a great job, they don't have quite experience in the world of business and finance and how the recruiting actually happens here. So the best places to learn, to be frank, is from people who've been through the process. And so that's the goal with Elevate. We want to bring in people who are, successful professionals at the top firms to kind of help you guys along the way. So with that said, it was a great, I don't know, James, if you have any closing
Yeah,
thoughts.
I was just going to say, Kaushik, thank you so much for, on behalf of SBC, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. I originally, so just for context, the rest of SBC, when Hunter Fields originally introduced me to Kaushik, he said, and this is an unbelievable opportunity. It's so rare that a person of Kaushik's background and sort of prestige experience in the industry would take the time to help college students. And so we just appreciate a ton you taking the time and continue to look forward to maintaining this relationship.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I look forward to building out the MIT as strong as all of our other partners. And definitely, someone asked for the link again, but I sent it out. Feel free to do it. And also if other people who are interested in potentially doing that, we're happy to kind of bring them on board. So thanks, James. Appreciate it. Best of luck, everyone. Like I said, don't hesitate to add me on LinkedIn if I can be helpful. I'll do my best. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kaushik. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.